My father handed the family business to my brother with a smile that never reached his eyes. "He's just better with people," he said, sliding the ownership papers across the polished oak table as if he were discussing the weather, instead of rewriting my future. I sat there in silence, listening to the soft hum of the office air conditioner and the distant ringing of phones I had spent 12 years answering, solving, and saving. My brother leaned back in his chair, already enjoying a victory he hadn't earned. No one mentioned the supplier contracts I had negotiated, the clients I had personally rescued, or the sleepless nights spent keeping the company alive during its worst years. By sunset, my office was empty. I packed my bags, took one last look at the building whose foundations carried my fingerprints, and walked away without an argument. 7 days later, their biggest client walked away too. Then another followed. By the end of the month, my phone finally started ringing. This time, it was my family asking for help. I wasn't the face of the family business. I was the reason it kept breathing. My father built the company from a single warehouse and a borrowed truck. And by the time I was old enough to understand what sacrifice looked like, I was already spending weekends stacking inventory and cleaning offices after school. My brother arrived later and naturally became the favorite in meetings. He could charm a room in minutes, remember birthdays, and make clients laugh over lunch. I was different. I stayed behind after everyone left, fixing mistakes before they became disasters and solving problems. Nobody else even noticed. When suppliers threatened to leave, I negotiated extensions. When deliveries failed, I found replacements before customers could complain. When cash flow tightened, I quietly rebuilt budgets that kept paychecks arriving on time. Nobody applauded the work that prevented catastrophes, because catastrophes never happened. My father started introducing my brother as the future of the company, years before the ownership papers appeared. I was introduced as the one who handles the technical stuff. After hearing that enough times, I stopped correcting him. Some roles become invisible when you perform them too well. The decision didn't arrive in a single moment. It arrived in pieces. A client would ask me a question during meetings, and my father would answer it by turning toward my brother. When contracts I had negotiated were signed, my brother's name appeared on the announcements, while mine disappeared into the background paperwork. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. The company was succeeding. That was supposed to be enough. Then the invitations started arriving for industry dinners and networking events. My brother attended every one of them. I stayed behind to handle operations, supplier issues, staffing problems, and the emergencies that somehow only appeared after office hours. Whenever I raised concerns about expansion plans or risky investments, my father would pause for a moment before saying, "You worry too much." A few seconds later, my brother would repeat the same concern using different words. Suddenly, it became a brilliant observation. I noticed the exchanged glances across conference tables, the small smiles, the conversations that stopped when I entered the room. No one was openly cruel. That was what made it harder to explain. Respect wasn't taken from me all at once. It disappeared quietly, one overlooked contribution at a time. The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. My father explained the transition as if it had always been inevitable. My brother would become the new managing director. I would remain involved where needed. Those two words stayed with me. Where needed. Not where I had spent 12 years building systems that kept orders, moving and clients staying. Not where I had sacrificed weekends, holidays, and opportunities that existed outside those walls. Just where needed. I looked around the room. My brother avoided my eyes. My father straightened the papers in front of him, with the careful movements of someone who had already convinced himself he was being fair. For the first time, I understood something I had spent years refusing to see. Hard work does not protect you from being underestimated. Being indispensable does not guarantee being appreciated. And loyalty offered without limits eventually becomes expectation. I stood up, thanked my father for the opportunity, and walked back to my office. The building felt strangely quiet that afternoon. I packed my bags, left my keys on the desk, and walked out without asking anyone to stop me. No one did. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I didn't leave with a plan for revenge. I left with a plan to move forward. For 12 years, I had built systems that reduced delays, tracked supplier performance, and protected relationships that took years to earn and only days to lose. Most of those relationships had never belonged to the company. They belonged to trust. And trust, unlike ownership, cannot be transferred with a signature. During my first week away, I rented a small office overlooking an industrial district on the edge of the city. No grand opening, no announcements, just a desk, a laptop, and a list of people I respected. I reviewed market reports, studied gaps our competitors ignored, and mapped out a business model built around reliability rather than expansion at any cost. Years of managing crises had taught me where companies usually failed: slow communication, broken promises, treating partnerships as transactions instead of relationships. I built my new company to avoid all three. Meanwhile, I quietly updated licenses, finalized registrations, and activated professional contacts I had accumulated over more than a decade. I never called my father's clients. I never asked anyone to follow me. I simply opened a door and focused on making sure that if people walked through it, they would never regret the decision. The first call came 8 days after I left. It wasn't from my father. It was from a logistics director I had worked with for nearly a decade. He asked a simple question: "Did you really leave?" When I told him yes, the line stayed quiet for a moment. Then he thanked me for everything I had done over the years and wished me luck. 3 days later, his company ended its contract with my family's business. Officially, they cited concerns about operational stability. Unofficially, they were no longer confident the promises being made could still be kept. The second client left before the month was over. Then a supplier I had personally, convinced to stay during difficult years, decided not to renew favorable terms. Deadlines slipped. Orders slowed. Problems that once disappeared quietly began reaching conference tables and inboxes. For years, I had been solving fires before anyone smelled smoke. Now the smoke was everywhere. I heard about it through industry contacts and mutual acquaintances. I never celebrated. I never made a phone call. I never needed to. One evening, my phone lit up with my father's name. I looked at the screen for several seconds before answering. For the first time in my life, he sounded uncertain. For the first time in his, he understood exactly what I had been worth. News travels quickly in industries built on reputation. Within weeks, people who had barely noticed my presence at meetings were suddenly asking questions about where I had gone and what I was building next. Some assumed I had taken clients with me. Others believed I had planned the entire thing from the beginning. The truth was simpler and somehow harder to accept. I had only stopped holding together pieces no one realized were falling apart. My brother called first. The confidence that had filled his voice during that meeting was gone. He asked about supplier relationships, delivery schedules, and clients who had stopped returning calls. For the first time, he wasn't speaking to me as competition or background support. He was speaking to me as someone he finally understood he needed. My father called later that week. Not to argue, not to defend his decision, just to ask if we could talk. Their reputation had been built over decades, and now every delayed order and broken promise carried a cost far larger than money. As for me, I learned something equally valuable. Your worth becomes easier to measure the moment people are forced to work without it. And sometimes the strongest revenge is not proving people wrong. It's allowing reality to finish the conversation for you. I met my father for coffee 3 weeks later. For the first time in years, neither of us talked about numbers, contracts, or deadlines. He looked older than I remembered. Not because of the business, I think. Because of regret. He apologized, not with dramatic speeches or excuses, but with the quiet honesty that only arrives after certainty has failed. My brother came later. We talked for hours about mistakes, expectations, and the weight of carrying roles we never truly chose for ourselves. Some relationships heal quickly. Others heal slowly. Some never return to what they were. And that's all right. My own company grew steadily over the following years. Not because clients followed me out of loyalty, but because consistency has a way of attracting people who value it. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't working to prove my worth to anyone. I already knew it. Looking back, I don't remember the satisfaction of watching the old business struggle. I remember the moment I stopped needing their approval to move forward. My father gave the family business to my brother because he thought leadership belonged to the loudest voice in the room. Life eventually taught all of us the same lesson. Sometimes the person holding everything together is the one nobody notices until they quietly let go.